First session we wanted to look at, first topic we wanted to look at this year, I thought was quite an important one, of social intelligence. So I want to get into it now. And the first thing to say is that if you think of emotional intelligence a bit like a train, you know, you arrive on the platform, you get on the train, and there you are, you're going along and you reach your destination. There you are, you can claim to be emotionally intelligent. Well, what I think social intelligence does is say you need to stay on the train for a few more stops, because there's a few more things to see and there's a bit more depth to actually go into. So let's just recap on, if we're on the platform, and even if we're on the train of emotional intelligence, what are we picking up? And the first thing we're picking up is self-awareness. And that is, I think, the absolute key to emotional intelligence, is your level of self-awareness, your strengths, your weaknesses, etc. The second part of it is your interpersonal skills, your understanding of the importance of building relationships, the understanding of being able to work with other people. And I think that's all good stuff. The key thing is, as I say, that social intelligence takes you just on a longer journey. The first thing I want to talk about is something called primal empathy. And it's an interesting idea. And I'll tell you a story. It happened to me last night. I was in Auckland for 2 days. I got off the plane, had my bag, and I had to get my car out of the car park at Wellington Airport. Now, for those of you here who know me, know that the combination of me, a ticket, a credit card and an electronic machine is almost doomed to failure. But the thing is, on this occasion, I actually managed to pay the money and get it right, because I've actually managed to fumble about on several occasions before and get it wrong. So there I was at the machine with credit card, with ticket, and actually pressed the receipt button, no sweat. And I turned round and there was a parking attendant standing there watching me and several other people, and these other people were fumbling around, I have to say. And he looked at me and he went and I looked at him and I went Now, the interesting thing just about that tiny little interlude was we both knew what we were thinking. And this is the thing about primal empathy. You see, what you can do, you can empathise with somebody. You can read their body language, look at what they're wearing, their hair, how they're sitting, what they're saying, and you can attempt to get into their shoes. But what primal empathy says is that can you get into their heads? The second thing, building on that primal empathy, is attunement. And I tell you what, I still remember from last year, I was eating my tea one night and the news was on, and the story was of the peace process in Northern Ireland. And you had the pictures, which I never thought I'd ever see. Tony Blair, you had Ian Paisley, and you had Martin McGuinness. So you had the IRA hard man, you had the Protestant hard man, and they were all standing there grinning. They were all grinning. You then saw more pictures of Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness, people who had decades of hatred for each other, kind of standing there laughing, and you know, like men do. They do all this kind of joshing and sort of all that. And but you know what? Those two guys were attuned to each other. They actually, after all those years of bitterness, had actually understood where each other were coming from. Now, how the hell do you do that? How do you get that level of attunement with somebody where you're actually on that same level? And you know what? There's something not particularly exciting about this. The first thing is you actually listen. The third thing is actually emotional accuracy. Is actually, if you can tune into somebody, actually getting it right. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you can get somebody quite wrong. You can actually think, I'm looking at everything about that person, I'm doing high road, I'm trying to pick up what they're really thinking, I'm trying to tune in, I'm trying to listen, and you still might not get it right. And guess what the answer is? I'm afraid it's nothing very exciting or sexy, it's practice. It's purely practice that you actually work out where each individual is coming from. And hey, there's nothing new in this, but guess what? People see a very different world to you. Fourth thing I think is interesting is, isn't it interesting, this morning everybody came in, right, and what we didn't do was issue a sheet. We could have done, we could have given you a sheet to say, the rules of this session are that you'll be polite to each other, we'll have no spitting, hitting, I don't want anybody, involved in violence, clearly no smoking, you'll sit down, you won't interrupt, you'll do this, you'll do that. Why didn't we need that set of rules? And the answer is because we actually, and if you're highly socially intelligent, you can read very, very easily and quickly what are the rules in operation here socially. That if you're socially intelligent, you can walk into a wide variety of situations and immediately pick up, what are the rules here? How does this place operate? How does this little group of people, what sort of conversations do they have? How do they actually, do you see what I mean? And in fact, we almost do this innately, but some people do it better than others. So if you build on that base, where does that take you? Well, I think that takes you to where the sorts of things that you need to be thinking about in terms of interactions you're having with people. And the first one to think about is synchrony. Is if you really want to be socially intelligent, and you think of what we talked about, the primal empathy, the attunement, the accuracy and understanding the rules of a situation, the other thing to then understand is this whole issue of, are you in sync with somebody? And the evidence here is fascinating, because you know what we've done, I'm sure Claire you do this as well and I do, is that what we train people to do is recognise the importance of matching. The importance of, if you want to build rapport with somebody, what you need to do is in some way mirror or match that. You are like them. And you can do it with body language, you can do it with tone of voice, you can do it with the language you use, you can do anything that says to the other person, I am in tune with you, I am in sync. But if you really want to be in sync with somebody, then you actually have to have it up here. Because in fact you have to actually be thinking about why you are in sync with somebody. Just mechanically doing it with your body, sitting in a certain way, actually is not that effective. What is effective is if we actually are very, very, very clear about the fact that we have deliberately decided to be in sync with somebody. And you can see this with people who you like and your friends. Influence is fascinating, and we can decide the level, the style of influence that we will go for. And one of the things, just tiny thing to think about, is you can influence a whole group of people by just one tiny thing, which I'm demonstrating now. If you change your voice, tone, pace, I'm saying absolutely nothing. The words are irrelevant, and yet this is having an influence on you here. And we can choose the tone of the voice that you use to influence somebody. You can choose all sorts of things about yourself, but how can you influence anybody unless you have really understood where the hell they're coming from and you know their story? Until you have actually had that primal empathy, you're trying to pick out what are you really thinking, you've tuned in and you're trying to get that emotional accuracy, and you're trying to work out what are the rules of this interaction, what's actually going on here. Our next Tea and Toast is Friday the 11th of April, so we're doing another Friday the 11th, and it's on, sounds a tad obscure, and it's called Theory U.